All right, guys. Welcome to We're Talking Sports. I almost forgot the name of the show. We're here. We're live right now. We're on Facebook Live. For those of you that can see us, but we're in the Radio Lobo studio. We tried to do this once. It didn't work.
No.
Shame on them. If we get fooled again, it's shame on us.
Yeah.
So, but we're here with Brett Burke.
Yeah, Brett again.
Well, it's the first time they're hearing him.
That's true.
It was a lost episode, so people are going to be looking for that episode. It's going to sell for like $1 million.
That is the goal. That's the goal.
That's the goal. Anyways, let's get into it.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on.
Yeah. So the first thing I think last night, despite the NFL being the major hit, we'll finish with that today.
All right. Okay.
The Dodgers-Cubs was on last night, and Clayton Kershaw, the best pitcher in baseball, Brett was just saying, finally made it to 7 innings, which has been a shocker so far in this playoff series. It is 1-1. I think it can be kind of a horse apiece here, but Brett, I mean, what ultimately do you think will be the outcome? Will the Cubs' youth carry them to the World Series, or do you think Kershaw's going to pitch every other game to make sure that the Dodgers get there?
Kershaw will not pitch every other game. I'll start with that. He's not going to pitch every other game. I saw a graphic today. He's thrown 302 innings in the postseason, or 302 pitches in the postseason. He only threw 309 between June and September because he was hurt. They had him on a pitch limit. He only pitched 4 innings, 5 innings, whatever. But the key for this series. So game 1, if any of you guys watched it, was Montero hit a grand slam in the 8th inning that gave them a 4-run lead after they had blown their 3-1 lead. Last night, a completely different ball game. Dodgers won having 3 hits. Cubs only had 2 hits. The dangerous Cubs lineup. And those 2 hits came from Baez, who can hit just about everything this postseason, and Contreras, their catcher. Adrian Gonzalez, a guy that's always been big in postseason, came through, hit a solo shot for the Dodgers last night in the 2nd inning. And going into tomorrow night and back in LA, you almost have to think the Dodgers have the upper hand right now. Having 2 games at home, having a chance to get a 3-1 lead. Yes, they lost. I believe Rich Hill pitched the first game, so they will be going to Mata in Game 3. He struggled in the NLDS, but he should be able to give them 4 to 5 solid innings, and then they can get to the bullpen, and that's what the whole series will come down to, is how the Cubs bullpen can last, because that's what blew the lead in Game 1. And if the Dodgers can continue to get good innings out of Jansen, who pitched 2 innings last night after Kershaw, and get somebody else to help in there, because Jansen can't throw every game 2 innings plus.
Well, that's kind of, I guess, my next question. I mean, throughout the season, the Dodgers' back end of their rotation was just not very good, as they were constantly rotating guys in to be that 4 or 5 guy. Let me ask you this. Are the Dodgers the better team if they get better starting pitching? Do they win the series if their starters can go 6 innings? I mean, ultimately the goal in baseball is to get your starters 6 or 7 innings every night. But if they can go 6 or 7 innings every night, whether they give up a couple runs or not, can the Dodgers score enough that they're just a better team? Or, I mean what comes down to it?
I'd say so. Just to correct something, Mata pitched Game 1, Hill's pitching Game 3. Okay. So they have their second best pitcher going in Game 3 of the series, and being at home, Hill's been really good this year. But I think if they can get through with Mata, because Mata should be able to pitch Game 4, that'll give him 4 days rest, I believe, or on his 4th day.
Yep.
So not too much a short rest, but if...
Gotta put the on-air sign on.
There we go.
We gotta know.
If the Dodgers get pitching just from at least one of their 2 back-end rotation starters, they should be okay. The Cubs have to get a good start from Marietta tomorrow, and I don't know if that's going to happen.
Yeah. Well, the other series that goes on tonight, Cleveland-Toronto, kind of seems to be the opposite, where you have Cleveland's great pitching going against the hitters in Toronto.
What's going on with Cleveland and Toronto? Big rivalry.
I don't know. They said that this could be the most magical year in sports for Cleveland, as you have the Cavaliers could win, or Cavaliers won the NBA championship.
Yeah.
The Indians could win the World Series, and the Browns could go 0-16. So
that's
that's a lot of magic for one city.
Yeah, they could get Deshaun Watson. That's huge.
That's true. So can Indians sweep Toronto? I mean, can they sweep their way to the World Series?
They won't sweep them. The crowd in Toronto is very similar to Wrigley.
Yeah.
I will put it that way. If you watched the wild card playing game or any of the games in the series versus the Rangers, that crowd in Toronto just has something special about it, and all the players know that going in. Cleveland has played Toronto plenty of times.
Yeah.
Terry Francona has managed in Toronto like 150 times since he was with the Sox
with the Sox,
7-8 years. Bauer's pitching tonight and Stroman's going for the Blue Jays. Bauer has been okay over the regular season, but
he just seems to be a different kind of guy. I mean, he was a top prospect.
Yep.
They went out and traded for him, I believe, from Arizona, and just ever since he's came over, he's just never seemed to be able to get over that hump.
No, and Arizona had a lot of those guys like Bauer and I don't remember any others off the top of my head, but they had 5 or 6 pitching prospects that were supposed to be
together.
Top of the rotation guys, and none of them really panned out that well. Bauer is okay, and he could put up a good start tonight versus Toronto, as they've shut down Toronto the first 2 games of this series, but Stroman brings a different kind of energy to the mound, and he tends to fire up the crowd in Toronto, and I think they get the win tonight. I don't know if Cleveland's going to try to go with Kluber tomorrow night, but if they do, I'm taking Kluber every time until somebody
until somebody can beat him.
Yeah, because he's been really, really good this postseason, and it looks like that will continue even versus Toronto.
So to end a little baseball segment quick, and then we'll move on to some NBA. Brett, can you just tell us a little bit about Mike Hazen, the guy that Arizona just hired as their new general manager, coming over from the Red Sox as a Red Sox fan? You were telling me a little bit about what his duties were and how it's changed now that Theo, he was under Theo and Theo left. But tell us a little bit about this guy. What does he bring to Arizona, and do you think that he's kind of the right guy for the situation or for the fit for the Diamondbacks?
So Mike Hazen started out under Theo, and he worked his way up over time. After Theo left, he was basically Ben Cherington's second-hand man. And now he was technically considered the GM under Dave Dombrowski, but he didn't actually make any of the decisions. Dave Dombrowski came in under president of baseball operations. They gave him a way to force Cherington out. They didn't want to fire him, but they forced him out by putting somebody above him, so he left. And then Hazen, though, going over to the Diamondbacks, is going to become that president of baseball, he's becoming a senior vice president of baseball operations and then also the GM. So he'll actually make decisions there. He'll bring sort of the same ideas that Theo and Cherington have, and Arizona is really going to need that with all the, I won't call them mistakes yet because they can still get something out of Shelby Miller.
Well, and Zach Greinke.
Yeah. Greinke, I think, is the lesser of the two because you didn't give up anything to get him.
Right.
But Shelby Miller, you give up Dansby Swanson, who's already into the majors for the Braves, plus a bunch of other prospects, and he had an ERA of 7. So he should bring a little bit of the same style that they have in Chicago, and I read today that everybody in the big leagues will be surprised if he doesn't hire the Red Sox bench coach, Torey Lovello, as the next manager.
Yeah, and he was kind of an up-and-coming guy anyway that was expected to get a lot of looks this offseason. And you had mentioned Hazen's now going to be making decisions. But, Ben, I have a question for you. I don't know who's making the decisions for the Cavaliers, but J.R. Smith just got $60 million. So can I ask, is LeBron the one making the decisions?
LeBron is not the one making the decisions. It's Mr. Gilbert making the decisions. I'm gonna move my mic here a little closer.
No, that's fine.
Yeah, it was. That's a big contract, but how many big contracts have we seen this offseason? We've seen a lot. LeBron got the biggest, I believe, or did Mike Conley did?
I think Mike
Conley's earning the most this year, but I think over time it'll be LeBron. Yeah. But JR got a lot of money, and you have to ask yourself, who would you go with? J.R. Smith for 4 years, or take a chance on one of their younger players like Jordan McRae? Jordan McRae had a very good summer league, and he's been great in the preseason.
Yeah.
So I don't know, but I feel like J.R. Smith is such a good fit for Cleveland,
right?
Because he loves the players.
Yeah.
He gets along with everyone else, and that comes as a shock to just about every other team he's been on.
Yeah.
The Nuggets. I think he spent some time in. Did he spend time in Chicago?
No, Denver, New Orleans.
Knicks.
New Orleans. He was with the Hornets for a little bit. That's where he started his career.
Okay. He's been to a lot of places, but everywhere he's been, it's been a fiasco.
Right.
We don't know what side of J.R. Smith we're gonna get.
Right.
But it seems like with Cleveland, he's good, like on and off the court, and I think that's huge. I saw them signing him a mile away. I was surprised Boston was trying to go after him.
Well, and I was just going to say, sometimes I guess you could say players may be the rumor starters. I mean, not to say that J.R. Smith did,
right?
But who's to say J.R. Smith didn't say Boston had interest to get a bigger contract?
Sure.
And bringing up Boston, are you glad the Celtics didn't sign him, or do you think that he would have been a good addition to the Celtics? Granted, maybe not that money.
I think he would have been he's not really. Yes, he can shoot threes, which is something that the Celtics tend to struggle with a little bit, but I don't think he would have a big enough role to warrant the type of money that he wanted.
Yeah.
A big thing with the Celtics isn't so much about, yes, it's about talent, but a lot of it is about chemistry, and that's half of the battle with Brad Stevens trying to make things work, and Al Horford fits into that role. J.R. Smith doesn't really fit the mold of a Celtics player under Brad Stevens.
So,
I agree with that.
The next thing doesn't affect really either one of you.
Any NBA move.
But anybody, I guess, NBA moves affect everybody. But this next move affected the division. More so than anything, as the Bulls and the Bucks made a straight swap, Michael Carter-Williams for Tony Snell. Brett and I were kind of discussing this earlier as we were waiting for you to get here, Ben. I mean, what does this trade do anything for anybody?
Well, let me just say, I could smell it a mile away.
All right.
So I feel like this entire offseason, we knew Giannis was going to be kind of the new point guard. We knew this was going to happen, and so everybody kept asking Jason Kidd, what about MCW? What about Michael Carter-Williams? What are we going to do with him? And he's like, he'll be in the plans. Yeah, he'll be in there somewhere. And like, he'll start. Wait, but if he's starting, who's going where? And it didn't make sense to me, especially then when they signed Dellavedova. This trade makes complete sense to me. Tony Snell really got knocked out of their rotation. It seemed like they preferred playing Doug McDermott over Snell.
Right.
Who else did they have? And they ended up playing Justin Holiday a lot more, who is now traded. And then they also have Denzel Valentine. So they were set without him. And hey, they got a pretty good backup point guard with MCW, and if Rondo has one of his little fits, they can put him in there.
No, I completely agree with that. And the one thing that I was telling Brett, I think when you look at Tony Snell, he's kind of like a poor man's Chris Middleton. Chris Middleton went down with a hamstring injury, but Tony Snell is a very similar player in the way that he plays. Granted, he may not be able to create his own shot the way that Middleton has been able to.
I think Snell's more defense.
But he's a bigger D&3 guy.
Sure.
He's going to sit around the 3-point line as all other 4 guys on the court are going to go to the hoop because nobody else can shoot besides Dellavedova, who they just signed. But yeah, this is kind of giving them 2 different looks with the guys that drive to the hoop, get to the basket. Now you add Deli and you add Jason Terry and Tony Snell. Now you're adding guys who can sit out on the 3-point line and make a wide open shot.
That's what the game is turning into now. It's have 2-3 guys who can shoot the ball, and even with Teletovic now, they want maybe 4 guys who can shoot the three.
And we can all thank the Golden State Warriors for that, as they've seemed to perfect the everybody out on the 3-point line. Kind of way.
Yeah.
So this weekend was a pretty big weekend in football.
Yeah.
Especially here in the state of Wisconsin, as Green Bay had the American game.
America's game of the week.
Game of the week, but also we had another big game here in Wisconsin. But before we get into that, we'll get into some other Big Ten news. Daryl Hazel from Purdue was fired, so anybody that's interested in that job can now apply.
Yeah,
but
did not work out for him very well.
I was thinking this morning about Purdue and I guess where Purdue was and where they are now, and the only thing that I could think of when I think of Purdue is Drew Brees and Kyle Orton. It just doesn't seem like a place that anybody really would want to go.
I think right now they're lucky to be in the Big Ten.
Yeah,
they're one of those teams that, they've been in there for a long time now. Yeah. Seems like every team, except for the new ones, the Marylands and the Rutgers.
Yeah, they're trying to play catch up.
Right, everybody has their moments. Nebraska was good for a couple of years. Obviously, Penn State forever. Even Illinois had the year where, with Rashard Mendenhall, where they made the Rose Bowl.
Right.
Purdue has just never been there.
Yeah.
They never have. And I feel like when Hazel was hired, everybody was like, oh, Purdue, they're coming up.
Yeah.
They're the new team.
Well, and he was an offensive-minded guy coming from a MAC school, which is known for their offense. And, nobody really thinks of Kent State being a great program, but Harrell was able to win there. And that was one of the things that made the appeal so attractive by them hiring him, thinking that he could also turn around a Purdue program.
Yeah.
But as we see, 3-9 in the Big Ten it doesn't do it. Do it.
No, absolutely not.
My question is, they're 3-3 right now.
Yep.
After losing to Iowa, who may not be as good as last year, but they're still 5-2.
Right.
He hadn't won more than 3 games in his first 3 seasons. He's finally getting things going the right way, and they can him.
But that's the same thing we were talking about last week with Greg Roman. The Buffalo Bills go out and score 30 points, but because the defense can't stop anybody, they fire Greg Roman. It just doesn't make sense. And as we know, I had brought up Brian Kelly to you, and now losing again, things are going to get interesting. But in college, it's so weird, or I guess it's a lot easier to get fired than it is in the NFL. I think the Cleveland Browns are the only team I've ever seen fire a coach after 1 year. But ultimately in college, you get 3 years because you get 2 years of the players that the coach before you recruited, and by 3 years, your first recruiting class is going to be juniors, and you're going to have 2 really true to your system classes in there as sophomores and freshmen. And if you can't win by then, universities are looking for buyouts almost immediately because of what Alabama and other teams like Ohio State with Michigan, when you have teams like that, they're just so much better than everybody else. Everybody just seems to be sitting on edge, and it's killing it. It's killing everybody.
But if you look at the Big Ten, who do you really expect Purdue to beat?
Right.
They're not beating Ohio State. Yeah, they're maybe Rutgers and maybe
an upset of Maryland. Maybe
or Minnesota.
Northwestern, Minnesota, right.
Maybe even Penn State.
Indiana. Yeah.
But even Indiana, I don't see, outside of, I only see the top 4 or 5 teams in the Big Ten beating Indiana. I think Indiana with their offense is
with their offense, I agree.
5th best team, maybe, or 6th best team in the Big Ten.
Could it just be that Purdue's a basketball school and they could care less about football and just, be thankful that they're in the Big Ten?
Yeah, I think some teams I think are under that mantra. I mean, when you think of it like that, I mean, realistically speaking, what other good purpose does Kentucky serve the SEC right now? I mean, they have not been a football school.
Well, yeah.
They have not been successful in football. I mean, I don't remember the last time they were successful in football. But, I mean, they have put players in the NFL like a Danny Trevathan or Randall Cobb who have come from Kentucky. But realistically, when we think of Kentucky, it's definitely not football that we think of. So, I mean, maybe it is one of those things where Purdue is just, they were making all those Final Four runs and they were making deep runs in the tournament when Matt Painter was first there. Was it late 2000s?
Yeah.
So the Big Ten just puts up with it. I don't know. I'm right there with you.
Maybe I think what they need to do is have conferences specific to sports.
I think that's a good idea, but at the same time, you just lose out on. I think so many conferences would lose out on so much money because you then change everything. So then travel becomes different, and money that they would be getting for certain things.
Well, just make it for the major sports: baseball, football, basketball, and hockey. Hockey actually does that already. Wisconsin's not in the. I believe they're not in the Big Ten for hockey.
I think they're Big Ten for hockey, but like the ACC doesn't have a conference for hockey. Notre Dame is in Hockey East. There's the Atlantic Coast Hockey.
Yeah, and I know, like the Minnesota schools, like some of the schools that are D2 for football, like D1
like Duluth
hockey
is D1.
Right.
Well, hockey Duluth is good.
Yeah,
right. But there's also not 140 hockey teams either. You know what I mean? In Division I, I believe. You also have to look at those numbers. You have 140 Division I football programs that are major D1. I mean, you have 300 Division I basketball programs.
I mean, with hockey though, it's more regional.
Yep.
Right. Yeah.
Your Wisconsins, your Minnesotas, your North Dakotas. That's and Boston.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why starting next year, Notre Dame is joining the Big Ten in hockey.
Are they? Okay.
They're leaving Hockey East, which Hockey East is a great conference for competition, as is BC, BU, Northeastern, who's the defending.
Yeah, that's just great hockey.
But it doesn't make sense from a travel standpoint when you have to go to Boston or like Orono, which is where UMaine is, and that's 5 hours north of Boston. There's nothing.
Yeah.
When 10 of your opponents are within 3 hours of each other.
Right. And I think you also bring up a big point where you were saying, I mean, realistically, who is Purdue going to beat? When you talked about Ohio State, Michigan, when you have those top 4 or 5 teams, including you want to talk about Indiana with the offense, I think no matter who you put in that spot, every conference is going to have those teams that just aren't good. I mean, that's just the reality of it, and I think Purdue just seems to be that bottom figure, that bottom piece of the Big Ten, and it's just going to stay that way, like you mentioned, them being there for forever.
Well, and I guess as you're saying, obviously that is good for the conference because you're not getting as many as these, for Wisconsin, these easy games, the Appalachian States and Southeastern Missouris.
Right.
You're still getting a couple of them, but... let me look at Wisconsin's schedule. Like what
they play Georgia State this year.
No, I know that, but going on, what is their schedule like? Like I know it's all Big Ten, but there's got to be a couple gimmies in.
I don't.
Yeah, Minnesota's, but I think Minnesota's a gimme.
Minnesota's 4-2 right now.
Oh, Purdue's a gimme.
Purdue's 3-3.
But see, that's what I'm saying.
Illinois is a gimme.
But I'm saying before when the Big Ten was actually 10 or 11, you didn't get as many of these games, and you got more Georgia States and Appalachian States. Right,
and to the Big Ten's credit, having the Big Ten championship game though does help the Big Ten.
Having if they had a Big Ten tournament,
and that was something that I wanted to bring up today. Like the Big 12, the Big 12 declined to add or expand today, which makes absolutely no sense from a football standpoint because basketball you have at large bids. In college football, there's 4 teams that make the playoffs: Baylor, and TCU could have made it over the last couple of years, but because there's no conference championship game, it's harder for you to get in because now you sit for those last couple of weeks while other teams are still playing and building that resume, and they could easily just surpass you. I mean, that's just is what it is. And, the Big Ten, I think, was the first team to really jump on that, the whole idea of expansion. Along with the ACC.
But I don't think the Big 12 needs to expand to have a conference.
I think they have 10 teams. Which, you can go 5-5, but it makes more sense to have the true 12, you know what I mean? To have more teams, to have a conference championship. But we'll see. So I'm guessing, did we, Brett, you were at the Notre Dame game.
Yes.
Ben, did you watch Wisconsin, Ohio State this weekend?
I did.
You did.
Yeah.
What was your takeaway from that game? Granted, I see the pain on your face.
Is what it was. I just feel like at the end of the day, Ohio State was the more talented team.
I agree. I would agree with that.
And it showed.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that.
And, I absolutely hate the playoffs, or the overtime. I think the 25-yard line is too close.
Okay.
If they want to do it at the 50. Because I think that would be more interesting. And, to me, when the game was going into overtime, I'm like, oh, that's it. Ohio State's going to win that easily. With their offensive attack, with JT Barrett at quarterback, there's no chance. I just feel like the defense is almost at a disadvantage when they're at the 25-yard line.
Yeah, but in that theory, Ohio State has the same disadvantage as well.
Yeah, but we don't. I feel like the Badgers are more of a entire drive kind of team. Ohio State, they're a big play team.
Yeah, they can score in one play where Wisconsin might not.
They're going to make the big play or the one-handed catch.
Yeah.
Which, for the 25-yard line, they can do that in three or four plays easily.
No, I agree with you. I think, for me, I look at it as a glass half full more than a glass half empty, because I think this shows that Wisconsin can be for real under Paul Chryst. You lose 14-7 against Michigan, who's ranked number 4 in the country. You lose 30-23, number 3 now after this week. You lose to the number 2 team in the country, 30-23 in overtime, and those are your 2 losses on the season. That, to me, speaks a lot about Paul Chryst, who's only in his second year at Wisconsin, and who's recruiting his players could possibly only get better, which tells me that if Wisconsin can win the West and then can go to the Big Ten championship game, granted, if they beat Ohio, let's say they beat Michigan, but still lose to Ohio State.
Sure.
You now have 1 loss going into a Big Ten championship game, probably against Ohio State. And if you can win that game, you have now just really given yourself a chance at the playoffs. Now, they didn't win the game, which is disappointing, but to be able to compete with the number 2 and number 3 team in the country in back-to-back, they had the bye week in between, but realistically in their last 2 games were the number 2 and number 3 team in the country. I think there's a lot of promise there, and I think this solidifies Wisconsin as one of the top 10 teams in the country. And I think that's something to be proud of, considering where we were under Gary Anderson.
For sure. Yeah, I agree with you there. And I think, I feel like no matter what, Michigan and Ohio State, especially with their head coaches, they're always going to be viewed as the top 2 teams in the Big Ten at the moment.
Right.
There's just no going around there. And recruiting's not going to get any easier.
Right.
I feel like right now their goal is just to stay ahead of Michigan State and Iowa.
Yeah.
And, they got a big game Saturday.
Well, I think realistically that's always been the goal, because the Big Ten has really always been Ohio State and Michigan. Now, we had
Michigan
our days.
State's had their run.
Right. Michigan State had their run in Wisconsin in the late 90s with Ron Dane, when they were going to consecutive Rose Bowls and things like that. We had our run there. But I think for the better part of the last 15 years, it's always been Ohio State and Michigan. And as you said, with Urban Meyer and Jim Harbaugh, I mean, to think that's going to change is naive. And I think if we can be that number 3 team in the Big Ten, I still think you can be a top 10 team in the country. And I think that speaks a lot to the University of Wisconsin.
Sure. Unless we see Les Miles sign with Illinois or something.
Hey.
That's a problem.
Hey, I believe in my boy Lovey. Lovey Smith's going to turn that place around.
Yeah, no, that's right. He's in Illinois.
He's the head coach
for Illinois. If Les Miles goes to Rutgers, then you're in real trouble.
They just hired a new guy, too. They just hired Chris Ash, who was Ohio State's D coordinator. So there's plenty of coaches to go around in the Big Ten on their first year.
Another name for Notre Dame is Greg Schiano.
Ooh, how would you like that? NFL guy, Tampa Bay. Ray Rice's coach with Rutgers. No? You're just shaking your head in disappointment. No?
Greg Schiano was a good college coach, though.
Notre Dame, if they lose, they don't play this week. If they lose the 29th to Miami, you might see Kelly fired after that game.
I agree with that. I completely agree with that.
Dropping to 2-6.
Facebook Live.
Uh-oh. Well, Ben is trying to... Uh-oh.
We're good.
We're good?
We're good.
All right. So, while Ben is fixing the Facebook Live here, something dramatic happened. I'm not sure. We all good, Ben?
Yeah, keep talking.
All right. So, Brett, I guess... we're talking about Wisconsin being in the top 10. Ohio State was 2. Michigan was 3 in the new rankings. If you had to pick a top 10, I guess, who's your top 10 right now?
Well, obviously number 1 is Bama.
So let me ask you this. Maybe I don't know if you're as high on Bama as I am, but I was watching like College Football Live or the scoreboard show that's usually on late at night on Saturdays. And they were talking about if you could put a gap in the top 10, it would be Alabama, gap, Ohio State. And I think that there's a ton of truth to that. Can anybody beat Alabama?
I think you could see Ohio State, Clemson, or Louisville beat.
Okay.
And they all have one thing in common, which is a dangerous dual-threat quarterback.
Right. Which has been Alabama's struggle in the past.
Honestly, Washington, I don't know how good they are.
Okay.
They could be the second best team in the country, but because of their big win so far, obviously they beat Stanford.
Right.
Stanford doesn't look as good. Stanford looked...
Well, neither does Oregon.
And that was my other point, is we don't know how good... The teams they played don't look as good, but they play... so many in-conference games.
Right.
And their out-of-conference schedule is not versus Power 5 teams.
Right.
That nobody really knows how good Washington is.
Yeah.
Michigan, if their defense steps up and plays the way they can, then obviously keeping it to a 14-10 or a 10-7 game, they have a chance to win. But top 10 overall, Alabama's 1, Ohio State's 2, Michigan's 3, Clemson's 4, and then I'd probably put Louisville 5, Washington 6, Nebraska 7, Baylor 8, the Badgers 9, and Houston 10. A&M, I don't think is a top 10 team.
Okay.
I know they're undefeated, but I think you still have to give credit to the other teams that are there. Like Houston, everybody's already fallen off Houston's bandwagon because they lost one game to Navy, who is now ranked in the top 25.
And they struggled against Tulsa. That's the other thing. Now, I think you're definitely a lot higher on Nebraska than I am, as Nebraska did not crack the top 10 for me. Alabama, Ohio State, I think Clemson, because of Deshaun Watson right now, is better than Michigan, because I think Deshaun Watson can win me a football game, whereas one of the 3 quarterbacks that Michigan has played over the last couple of weeks, I don't know that any of them can. Washington at 5, until somebody can stop them, It's hard to not have them there. I have Texas A&M at 6. I think The clinic that they put on against Arkansas just beat the number 12 team in the country in Ole Miss this weekend. Texas A&M is not going to beat Alabama, but I think with that offense and the best player in the country in Myles Garrett, it's hard to not pick them. Louisville, you said Lamar Jackson, Baylor, Houston, Wisconsin. For me, I mean, that's just the reality. I mean, it's so hard because so many teams are still undefeated, but they have. You still have a lot of conference play yet to go. A lot of teams not playing anybody.
And looking at the rest of Washington's schedule, we're not going to see them play anybody, really. The best team they got, so they play Oregon State, at Utah, at Cal, USC, Arizona State, and at Washington State.
Right.
And the best team based on this year so far that they have left is probably Arizona State.
Yeah.
I believe Arizona
State. And Arizona State just they just got blown out by Colorado.
Okay, so they must have dropped. They're either 4-2.
They might be 5-1, and they're only lost to Colorado, possibly. As Colorado, I think, is 5-2 or 4-2.
But either way, not the typical Pac-12. USC isn't very good that we know of. Utah is 6-1, but they're not the Utah of the past couple years, I wouldn't say.
So as we were talking about rankings, did Lamar Jackson cost himself the Heisman Trophy this weekend? 180 yards passing against Duke.
I don't. So the ACC, I think. Well, I guess you can look at it two ways. Teams at the bottom might be better than they appear.
Okay.
Because NC State, so Notre Dame lost to NC State 10-3. NC State goes to Clemson, or plays Clemson.
And plays Clemson pretty tough.
And goes to overtime.
Yep.
So, I don't know it's hard to tell how good the bottom of these conferences are. Is everybody so high on the SEC and saying that overall they're the best conference, and they have the best team in the country, but how good is the SEC when your number 2 team in the conference just lost by 50 to Alabama?
Yeah. Well, and speaking of that, I mean, you talk about a team like Georgia who loses to Vanderbilt in their place.
And it's like Lamar Jackson, he could have cost himself the Heisman, but then again, Deshaun Watson didn't do, he didn't do a ton, but Deshaun Watson had bad games at the beginning of the year.
Right.
There's enough guys that have already had bad games or off games or low production games that they should still be able to maintain. He should still be able to maintain the lead in the Heisman race, in my opinion.
All right. So, Ben, you had brought something up before with Cleveland, and you were saying possibly getting Deshaun Watson. Of what you have seen, do you believe Deshaun Watson is the best quarterback in college football? I mean, is that the guy, if you're taking a quarterback, is that the guy you're taking?
Definitely, yeah. I think he, everybody's talking about the dual threat quarterbacks now. I'm pretty much, really the standard is Cam Newton. Everybody's looking for the next Cam Newton. We saw it with Jameis. That's about it. but everybody kind of has a little bit of Cam Newton style. There were some comparisons to Carson Wentz, even Dak Prescott a little bit.
Right.
But I feel like Deshaun Watson has the most similar characteristics to Cam Newton that we've ever seen.
Okay. I personally, as a Bears fan who's going to be looking for a quarterback, I would not be upset if they were able to draft Deshaun Watson. Brett, watching Kaiser every week, I also have Deshaun Watson as my number one. Has Deshaun Kaiser cost himself? I mean, he's draft eligible. Going into this week, he was flying up boards despite Notre Dame's struggles. I have him as my number 2 quarterback. I guess draft eligible quarterback. Is it safe to say that he does still deserve that? Or I've already seen talk that there's a possibility that Notre Dame makes a change at the quarterback position.
Kaiser will be the quarterback going forward. I think I just saw something Kelly said. He's intent on fixing that. He did get benched for a quarter and a half this weekend versus Stanford. He does not make... He tries to force too many things. He is young. Technically, he's a junior, but he redshirted a year, I believe.
Okay. He's a junior academically.
Yeah. Okay. So he's eligible to enter the draft.
Right.
But he still... He might only have 1 year left. I don't know if he technically redshirted, but he's been there for 3 years, but he didn't contribute at all.
Right.
Until Zaire got hurt because Golson was there, and then Zaire was a backup. But he doesn't, like watching this weekend, seeing him throw those 2 picks, he doesn't make that great of decisions yet. And I don't know if that's because he's pressing because he knows how bad things have been.
Okay.
But if going forward, I mean, if he gets the right coach and the right system in the NFL, he can be successful.
Okay.
He has the tools.
Yeah.
He just doesn't use them as well as he should.
I got you. So to finish out, I guess the top quarterbacks draft eligible, Brad Kaya, I think, is a name that we should all watch for. He's a guy, I think, that could be the Teddy Bridgewater of this draft class, where somebody sneaks into the late rounds to get him. Baker Mayfield is kind of an enigma right now, as he was great and a Heisman candidate last year, not so much this year. And Mitch Trubisky, the one-year wonder from North Carolina. But I think, this year is going to be heavy defense. So many teams in the NFL need defense as offense just controls the league, which takes us into our topic of the NFL. I know Ben's been waiting on this all day. But we got the news that Ben Roethlisberger tore his meniscus, which is a huge injury to a big-time offensive player. What does this mean for Pittsburgh? What does this mean for the AFC and the AFC North specifically? Because it's going to impact all three, as the Steelers are winning the division, one of the top teams in the conference, and Big Ben possibly being an MVP candidate.
Yeah, for sure he was. I think he was a top MVP candidate before getting hurt. Really, I think the big thing for the AFC North, this opens the window for Baltimore to make a move. Cleveland continues to struggle. I mean, I know they lost to New England, but still they're 2-4, so that's not good. I just think right now Baltimore is the team that looks the most set to kind of usurp Pittsburgh at the top of the division. But let's not count out Pittsburgh yet, because Landry Jones is, I think he's pretty good.
Yeah.
When he has been able to come in, he's shown that he can do all right. And then with receivers, Sammy Coates is banged up, so don't know what's going on with him. They still have Antonio Brown. They still have Le'Veon Bell. Even D'Angelo Williams. So if they want to carry the ball 50 times a game,
they can. Right.
So I don't know. And then just conference-wise, you'd have to say that they were the favorites to get a bye week. With New England probably being the other one. The question is, who's going to be that other team?
Does this give Denver a chance to get back and to get home field?
It's possible, yeah. I think it'll be one of the teams from the West, whether it's them, Oakland, or Kansas City.
Okay. And the crazy thing about this whole situation was that this week, I believe Pittsburgh is going to New England this week.
No, it's in Pittsburgh, but
I mean, they play.
It should have been a great game, and now.
And then Pittsburgh has a bye next week. I believe, which they're saying that there is a chance this is the only game that Ben Roethlisberger is going to miss.
Well, I mean, we'll see with Big Ben, because it seems like he plays hurt a lot.
Yeah.
I feel like he's played half his career
He's the Iron
hurt.
Man in the NFL.
Sure, yeah. So I don't know. I do think, though, that they are better with Roethlisberger hurt or not.
Right. So let me ask you this, Brett. You were just saying it should have been a good game. Are you just chalking this one up as a W right now, or
no?
Does Landry Jones still scare you, or?
I mean, Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell scare me.
Okay.
Landry Jones will be the benefit of having those guys on the team, and it could still be a pretty good game. It's just not going to be I don't think it'll be the quality of game that it was going to be with Big Ben in there, and even Big Ben hurt still throws for 400 yards. But the Patriots have said that they will prepare for Big Ben until 90 minutes before the game when the inactives and actives come out, because there's been times where he was out before and he still suited up just to be the backup, and then he came in the second quarter, I believe, last year and went off. But Big Ben's a different type of player, and I'm sure he will do everything he can to make sure he's back by November 6th versus the Ravens at the latest, which is the week after their bye. Yeah,
I completely agree. I think Big Ben is definitely a huge thing. I think, especially coming, I guess, from your situation, Tom Brady missing 4 games and still being able to play well. I guess as a Pittsburgh fan, you hope that similar situation remains true.
That's a very different situation.
Right. I get that, but I mean, you would hope that. I think now, granted, the Patriots have Gronkowski, but I think overall, I think Pittsburgh has more weapons than New England does, and New England was still able to maintain that level of success with Jimmy Garoppolo, who had never started in an NFL game, and Jacoby Brissett, who was a rookie, and I think Landry Jones, it's possible, but
I mean, New England also had Julian Edelman and Martellus Bennett.
Right, yeah, no, I agree, I think
it's all about, the system and, how do these coaches prepare their quarterbacks. Todd Haley's still in Pittsburgh, right?
Yes, I believe he's the offensive coordinator.
He's a quarterback guy.
Yeah.
I'm sure he's been grooming Landry Jones the minute with whoever first stepped in there.
Yeah.
It is what it is,
Yep.
I mean, there's a story in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette today that says Landry Jones is still not convinced that Big Ben will not play this weekend. So
that sums it up right
I don't know if that means anything, but Landry Jones is probably still not sure that he will even play this season because Big Ben plays through just about everything.
Yeah. That he does. So we are what, six games in? I believe it is.
It's week 6.
It's week 6. So we got about 10 weeks left. I guess so far to this point, who would you guys say big surprises, if anything, whether it be good or bad? I guess what is your biggest surprise of the NFL thus far?
I'm going to say Philly.
Okay.
I think Philly's been a big surprise team. Obviously, I never saw Carson Wentz starting, let alone week 1.
Right.
And he's been great.
Yep.
And it's not just them. It's not just him. Their defense has also played really well under Schultz, Jim Schwartz. Jim Schwartz. Yes. They've been good all around, and then obviously the Vikings.
Yeah.
You got to put them on top.
Yeah, Brett.
I'd say I'd throw in the Falcons with them as well.
Okay.
I think I don't know if you guys saw the highlights, but the Falcons kind of got, I don't want to say robbed, but
yeah, the Julio Jones situation.
Richard Sherman interfered on that final big play from Jones, and that would have put them in, I think it was close to the 20.
And they lost by 2, right?
Yeah, they lost 26-24.
Yeah.
And Matt Bryant, their kicker, pretty solid kicker. So,
and I think he's, not to take reality to fantasy, but I think he's the number 1 scoring kicker in football right now as well.
But to see them come back, score 3 touchdowns in the third quarter versus Seattle, whose defense is still really good, was a big step. Julio Jones can do that. It doesn't matter who's defending him. Julio Jones is one of the best, if not the best in the game, and if Matt Ryan can throw him a deep ball every now and then, they always have a chance.
Yeah, I thought we were just talking about him last week, and we were just talking about how I think, Ben, you had mentioned Rex Ryan being on the hot seat. Buffalo's sitting at 4-2 right now.
Yep, they've lost 4.
They came out and just blew San Francisco out of the water, 45-16. I mean, San Francisco. I think there was a.
I thought Chip Kelly and Colin Kaepernick. I thought that was the perfect combination.
Oh,
first half it was good. The second half it was like 2 for 17 on passes.
The two other teams, I think, Tennessee being 3-3, I think is a good step for them. Maybe not be the biggest surprise, but drafting Mariota at 2 overall, and then last year having another high draft pick to be sitting at 500 right now. I think they're going in the right direction. They'll continue to add pieces.
They got a good line.
Yeah, and I don't know if you guys watched that game last night, but despite Brock Osweiler just playing awful until the final
3 minutes
of the game, Houston is 4-2 and scored 17 unanswered points on the Indianapolis Colts last night. And my last two are, 1-5 Carolina Panthers and 5-1 Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah, I don't really know what's going on with Carolina's defense. I kind of viewed. I think both of you guys picked New Orleans, but I saw, hey, if Cam's playing, it's over.
And I think one of the things, especially that I think I looked past, thinking that Carolina, I thought if anybody was going to go back to the Super Bowl, it was going to be Carolina, not Denver.
I think everybody kind of.
And in my anticipation though was going into last season, there was talk that Josh Norman was going to get cut, that he wasn't even going to make the roster, and he just came out and had an All-Pro year, turned it into some big money from the Washington Redskins, and that's really the only difference that I can think of, or player that's not there that was there last year. So. Does this speak wonders to Josh Norman, or is this just the reality of the Super Bowl hangover?
You tell me. I don't know. It's anybody's best guess, but you are right when you say that they have a cornerback problem.
Yeah.
Them and Green Bay, both just terrible cornerbacks right now.
Well, and what scares me the most is. Now, Green Bay is, 3-2, so they're still over 500. They're still sitting okay.
Yeah.
In terms of a wild card, the chances of them catching Minnesota, they would need a lot of help, realistically speaking.
Only one loss, really, by Minnesota.
Well, right, but Green Bay would still have to.
We're still very early in the season.
Would have to be those teams.
We're still very, very early in the season.
Right. But, at this point to think Carolina could have a top 5 or top 10 pick going into next offseason is very scary.
Well, it's scary if they make the right pick.
Right.
That's the thing. It was scary when the Cowboys drafted Ezekiel Elliott.
Yeah.
Because we all knew what could happen with him in that offensive line.
Right.
I don't think anybody got scared when the Rams picked Jared Goff.
Right. No,
I didn't get chills.
No, I completely
I didn't
agree.
even get chills when Philly picked Wentz.
Yeah.
It's... I'm trying to think who was their draft pick this year.
Carolina.
It was a defensive tackle.
Yes.
Yep. And then the year before that, it was Shaq Thompson. So I think you really got to keep an eye on these guys. I think towards the end of the year to see how they're developing.
Yeah, I think Shaq Thompson, I believe, is starting for them.
Yeah, yes,
and
he is.
He's actually been playing pretty
well. He is, and he's been okay.
I think Butler is out currently. They're rookie for this year. Or at least he's missed the last game that I watched on TV.
But we really need to see how these, especially Vince Butler, because both Starr and K'Wan Short are
free agents.
They're going to be free agents coming up. So
Carolina's definitely in a position where it's could either stay really, really good, and this is just an off year, or it could go really, really bad, really, really fast.
And they're still a very talented team.
Right.
They have some good pieces, but they have some problems, and they're going to have to address that very soon, especially with cornerback. They drafted 3 corners this year, but usually...
Right, corners take a little while.
It takes time.
Yeah.
And the Packers have learned this as well.
Yeah. So, I guess, having watched games yesterday...
Yeah.
Who to you stood out this weekend? Who was your big-time performers? Maybe who shocked you? I mean, who did you guys just think came out this week and played pretty well?
Easy. Jay Ajayi.
Yeah,
for Miami. I was waiting for him to kind of have a breakout game. Remember, he didn't even play week 1. He was a healthy scratch.
Yeah.
I don't know if something's going on between him and Adam Gase, but seems to be over. Everybody was kind of talking about Arian Foster coming back, but usually when it comes to running backs, the younger guy usually plays better.
Yeah.
And he did against Pittsburgh's defense. So really, and he's the first running back this year to run for 200 yards. So big week for Ajayi.
Yeah, Brett.
I think you can. I'd throw in Brandon Cooks and Golden Tate. Both had big games in basically making the difference in their team's win. Cooks has had I think he's had a couple big games this year, but Tate, this was really the first time where he's been the go-to over Marvin Jones, and he made the most of it, and that's the reason why
Well, and that makes Detroit dangerous.
Yep.
I mean, as well, it makes them even more dangerous to now have another wide receiver opposite of Marvin Jones.
Yeah, I mean, Jones I think he had 2 catches for 10 yards and a touchdown.
That's incredible. Considering he was leading it may be skewed, but he was leading the league.
He was going against the worst man-to-man cornerback in the league. And if that's not any proof for you, look at the week before and Stephon Diggs. Stephon Diggs hasn't been able to have that same kind of production.
Right.
It's all who you go against.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, but at the end of the day, you still got to catch the ball and get open regardless of who's on the other side of you. So, I mean, whether or not him being at the top was deserved, it just, going into this weekend, I think he was the league leader. And speaking of receivers, Ben's going to give me a sigh here because I think it might have been all over ESPN yesterday, last night, and this morning. But Odell Beckham had 8 for 222 yards and 2 touchdowns. Everybody has said he's not Odell anymore. He's the temper tantrums are ruining him. Oh, he's too emotional. Just let the man play.
No, he's been playing great, and
it's just because he hasn't been finding the end zone.
We know he's a good receiver.
Right.
We know that. What bothers me is I'm not hearing anything about his stats. I'm hearing about his in the football net. Look at what he's doing with the net. Like, I don't care about that. That is not relevant.
Yeah.
I could care less what they're doing on the sidelines, unless it's somebody punching Buddy Ryan in the face. I'd want to know that stuff. I don't care about Odell Beckham going, hugging an inanimate object.
Right.
I could care less.
He proposed to the net this week, and that's what
I honestly don't care.
SportsCenter was talking about instead of.
I'm sure that was number 1 on their top 10 list.
It honestly might have been. It's awful. Having looked this weekend, having saw who people played, I think going into this year, the debate was Antonio Brown or Julio Jones as the best receiver in the league. Seeing what Julio Jones did yesterday against the Seattle Seahawks, still putting up fantastic numbers, maybe not big surprise, big player of the weekend numbers because that's what Julio Jones does. Is Julio Jones the best wide receiver in the NFL?
Yes.
Brett?
Yeah, I'd say so, but if you have a healthy Big Ben with Antonio Brown and a healthy Matt Ryan with Julio Jones, it's
a horse apiece.
Yeah, I mean, it's
you
can't go wrong with either one.
Right.
But Antonio Brown has a down game yesterday because Big Ben can't throw.
But I think the difference, especially for me, is I think this is not the first down game that Antonio Brown had throughout the season, Julio Jones only seems to get better. And it's just, I don't want to say he's Randy Moss, but at his size, with his athleticism and his ability, I mean, that's almost what we're looking at for this generation. Is Julio Jones is this generation's Randy Moss?
Yeah, I think we've had a lot of those guys. I mean, obviously he has performed the best. We can't forget about Calvin Johnson so quickly.
Or AJ Green.
Yeah, AJ Green. Even Des Bryant when he's healthy.
Right.
That's a big if, I guess. And I don't know. Do you think Demaryius Thomas has kind of fallen off that?
I don't want to say
receivers list?
I don't want to say he's fallen off the elite receivers. It's hard. Demaryius Thomas has kind of been the tale of two careers, so to speak. With Tim Tebow, I mean, he was just kind of he is their best receiver. Don't get me wrong. And with Tim Tebow, I mean, he was just they weren't going to throw the ball all that much. And I think his big breakout was the touchdown catch against Pittsburgh in the playoffs.
Right.
And then when they got Peyton Manning, he was just really able to take off.
He kind of became his Reggie Wayne.
Right. But now back to not really having that level of a quarterback is starting to dip a little bit. Now, I'm not saying that it's Demaryius' fault, but his quarterbacks always go hand in hand with how great a wide receiver is.
Terrell Owens made Jeff Garcia look like a All-Pro.
Right, and Donovan McNabb, who was a level 2. I would say he's a level 2 quarterback, not elite, but he was a decent quarterback when he played.
He was one of the first real dual threat quarterbacks.
Yeah.
So I think that took a lot of teams off guard. But going back to Demaryius, all he needs is a guy to throw him the ball. And
right.
I don't know his stat line right now, and I don't even know how many targets he gets, but throw him the ball. I want to see if he can
just
live up to the level, because we're talking about Allen Robinson more than we're talking about him. And Robinson's a great receiver.
Right.
But we were talking about, how many touchdowns did Demaryius Thomas get when Peyton threw for 51 touchdowns? He probably got about 15 of those.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
This year, Thomas has 31 catches on 44 targets for 416 yards and 3 TDs.
That's not bad.
No, not bad at all. Not bad at all. I would completely agree with that.
But you figure they've played 6 games,
yeah,
and he's only getting 5 catches a game.
Again, I think that comes back to whether that's Kubiak's decision or the play of their quarterback. I don't know, but
he does have 16 catches for 178 in October, so it's obviously September was probably not a very good month for him if he's got 16 of his 31 catches in October, and it's only second week of football in October.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. Ben, this brings up an idea for me. Maybe we can get Brett to get in on this. But I think after we will have our NBA preview on Friday.
Yep.
Brett will not be here to join us.
Okay.
Mount Mary calls.
Yep.
But I think we should bring back our finish our top 10.
Sure.
Greatest NFL players of all time.
Yeah.
That we were doing.
Sure.
So.
We can do that.
But I'm all out of stuff.
Okay. Yeah, no. Any thoughts on tonight's game?
I'm hoping Fitzgerald and Johnson don't get 120 fantasy points. That's what I'm hoping.
It's all about fantasy.
No, Drew Brees got me 95 fantasy points. So
yeah, so I need a lot of help.
All right. I guess we'll wrap it up then. Thank you guys so much for listening or watching. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
We're trying to reach fans, as easier ways as we can. If you want to know more about the Packer game, check out my video that I posted. fun little rant there. 20-minute rant. We definitely would not have had time here to do it, but thank you guys so much, and we'll see you Friday.